we all have different abilities, and as we like to call them, superpowers that enable us to do a great deal.
This is Enable, the Disability Podcast, where we share stories, experiences, support, resources, and more for people with disabilities and different abilities. We are at Enable Podcast on social media. My name is Jeff Herbert.
And my name is Kurt Hauer. We're doing a special Q&A episode today where we'll ask each other questions that others have wanted to know more about. Thank you for joining us.
Kurt, you've talked before in this podcast about being diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, but I don't know if everyone knows exactly what that is. Is it something that hurts? Is it something that inhibits your movement? Is there medicine or treatment that you get?
Yes, Jeff. Ankylosing spondylitis is a rare form of arthritis. It's also considered an autoimmune disease. It attacks the spine as well as other joints, such as the hips, shoulders, that kind of thing. But it also has an impact on your rib cage. There can be problems with people and their ability to breathe as the disease progresses. It can affect your eyes. There's a condition known as uveitis, where it's like an inflammatory disease of the eyes. Fatigue, chronic pain, as far as limited mobility. And as the disease progresses, it affects the spine as far as fusing the vertebrae. So it is painful. The condition's painful. It's treated mainly with anti-inflammatory medication, such as ibuprofen. There are new medications out there to slow the progression of the disease, such as biologics. And I take a monthly injection called Bimzelx, and that actually has the ability to slow down or interfere with inflammatory markers. So, but that treatment is costly. And a lot of people like myself, if we don't have insurance, that medication can run up to $7,300 per month. Some of the other things that are used to treat ankylosing spondylitis include muscle relaxers. Baclofen is the one that I use and is my drug of choice. I take it 3 times a day, and it just helps relieve the muscle spasms that are associated with the disease. So there's a lot to it. One of the things that I've learned over time is physical therapy, exercise, stretching, and diet can also have beneficial effects as you're treating the disease.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that has come up often on this podcast is about health benefits of diet and exercise just in general, because so many physical conditions can help if you regularly exercise or avoid certain foods. I mean, when you say inflammatory, do you have to avoid like spicy foods or does it get worse?
You know, it's funny you should ask. Actually, in the last couple of years, the disease has affected my tongue. And I actually have issues where my tongue will develop ulcers or sores. And when it's not, it's very sensitive. So I have to be particularly careful with what I eat. Believe it or not, spicy foods are not so bad, but things like hard foods, like pretzels, chips, that kind of stuff, that seems to irritate it. But yeah, good question. Well, I want to know more about you. You have profound hearing loss, and I've known this since being around you. There are a couple of things that I want to follow up. But first, I want to know you have hearing aids, but why don't you use sign language?
So I was born with a profound hearing loss, and I grew up in a mainstream community where I was one of only just 2 kids in my school district that had hearing loss. So there weren't a lot of other kids out there that I could communicate in sign language with. That was one aspect of it. Another one was that, with hearing aids and speech therapy and visual cues like lip reading, I had enough hearing and all of those tools at my disposal to learn how to communicate orally. My parents ultimately decided at a certain age that, most people use oral communication, verbal communication, and I had enough of my hearing and with hearing aids that they thought I should just try and do verbal communication. Luckily, it worked out well for me, but I know that it is challenging for other people um, in a way that might not even be an option sometimes. A lot of times, sign language is chosen because this might feel like the only option. There are also people out there that will do both. And, I can do finger spelling and a few signs here and there, but not enough to have a conversation. Whereas other people who might verbally communicate and sign might be able to do both of them regularly because they interact with and communicate often with other people who have hearing impairment, deafness, and use sign language. So honestly, I don't necessarily interact enough with other people who use sign language for me to regularly learn it. I've been learning a little bit here and there, but not enough to have a conversation. So next time you see me in the community, if you know sign language, try having a conversation with me, and I will try and keep up, and it'll motivate me to keep learning more and practicing more as well. Speech therapy is kind of interesting. When you do that as a person who's hard of hearing, you're not hearing the way other people communicate. What you are doing is you're watching a person movement of their mouth. You're learning like how much breath comes out, whether or not your vocal cords are vibrating, and so you're kind of mechanically learning how to orally communicate as opposed to just the way other people would. They just hear how a sound is made and then they repeat it, and that's how most people learn to communicate orally. So with like, for example, with speech therapy for me, I had to watch a person's mouth, which is kind of how I learned how to lip read. And it's interesting, you also learn that there are a lot of sounds that look exactly the same but are completely different sounds. So, for example, like sail, ship, and potato chip and ship look exactly the same. So I can't understand what a person is saying just by reading their lips, but with context, like if we were in a restaurant and you were talking about having potato chips, or if we were at the docks and we saw a sail ship, that would help me understand what is happening. Um, and I can say the difference because I know that from speech therapy, you use more breath when you say the S word as opposed to the CH sound. Um, it's also different, when you're if people are watching this version of the podcast on YouTube, they can do this with me too. You can, if you put your hand in front of your mouth and you make a F sound, go, you feel the breath coming out. And if you make a V sound, go, you won't feel the breath coming out on your hand when you make the V sound, even though the and the sounds look exactly the same. I can say the difference. I can make the different sounds because I know that from speech therapy how much breath comes out. Same thing if you put like your hand on your voice box and you make a S sound, go S. You don't feel any vibration, but as you make a Z sound, it goes Z. It looks the same with your mouth, but the vibrations in your voice box feel differently, and that's how you're able to make the different sounds. So that's how I learned how to communicate orally, even though I couldn't hear all the differences exactly the same way. So, for example, the CH and the SH, some of my friends have joked, if the two sound, if the two different sound the same to me, which sound am I actually hearing? And honestly, I don't know. I'm just hearing one sound. So the CH and the SH sound exactly the same to me. I don't know which one I'm correctly hearing, but I can say the difference and I can understand the difference too with speech therapy and lip reading and context and hearing aids and all of those tools.
So does that explain? Sometimes we spend a lot of time together, and sometimes you'll ask me to repeat a word. Is that why?
It can be a number of reasons. One thing is that if you start a new topic and I'm not understanding where you're going with the conversation, like if you introduce something completely new in the conversation, like if we're having a conversation about like what we're going to order for lunch, for example, I know that your next couple of questions might be something related to like the specials or like what we're going to have for an appetizer, things like that. But then if you suddenly start talking about a completely new topic, like, hey, did you see the game last night? Or did you hear about this new movie that's coming out? Or if you anything else, if it's completely new information that doesn't have any context to what we're talking about, that alone can be challenging for me because when I'm talking with people, I am constantly running through all the scenarios of what a person might be saying or what they're about to say. So I'm anticipating what they're going to say. And so I might have like a roster of like 25 things that Kurt, you might say in the next minute. And I'm ready for them so I can respond to them. But if you say something completely new, I might be thrown for a loop and you might have to repeat yourself. There are also things like, if there's a distraction, like a loud sound, if I'm not looking at your face when you say a certain word, or if it's maybe like a complicated topic with like a lot of information happening at the same time, I might ask you to repeat it. I'll also sometimes just completely not hear what a person is saying, and no amount of context or visual cues will help. For example, my wife is from Texas, so occasionally she'll say things with a little bit of an accent, and I'll ask her to repeat things, and then sometimes I will say, "Can you rephrase it?" And then if she rephrases it, she'll say it, or she'll say a different word that maybe the accent doesn't come into play, and I can understand her better in that situation. So it's a lot of little things. There's no one thing. Um, but if I do ask you to repeat yourself, that's not because you're doing anything wrong necessarily. It's just because I just need that extra help.
Okay. Another follow up question about hearing aids. So they are not the end all be all, I would imagine. And with you, we've been in certain situations where we've been at a restaurant or been in the office. And if I come up behind you, often you won't hear me at first. And I might have to position myself so I can get your attention.
I've been in many situations. Like I used to work a retail job, and sometimes a customer would come up behind me and try and ask me a question when I'm working on something and I'm just not able to hear anything that's happening behind me. And then eventually they'll start shouting, "Oh, are you deaf or something?" And I'm still aloof to what's happening. And one of my coworkers will let them know, like, yes, he is deaf. um, and I understand why people might do that in that situation, and they don't necessarily mean anything rude about it, but it does come across rudely in that situation. So I was trying to encourage people, first of all, be comfortable with me, and it's perfectly fine to tap me on the shoulder and try and get my attention. If I don't respond to you, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It might just be because I simply didn't hear you, or didn't know that you were talking directly to me. um, so hearing aids, you're right. They're not a fix. They're not a cure. They're not corrective like glasses are. Hearing aids. So, for example, my hearing loss, it tend to the average person's hearing kind of looks like a smiley face. So they hear the low range at this amplitude, and then they hear the mid range, which is where most conversation is, and then they hear the high range, high pitched noises or sounds. And for me, my hearing looks like almost a straight line, or maybe even like a curved line downward. So I hear the bass notes, I hear the low pitched sound almost as well as anybody else. Then when you get to the mid range, which is where most conversation is, that's where I start seeing a significant drop off in my hearing. And then you get to the high pitched sounds, and I can't hear them at all. Even with my hearing aids, I can't hear the 5 or 6 rightmost keys on a piano. I just hear the clacking of the key on the piano. So I can't actually hear the notes that are being played. Um, and with hearing aids, what they're doing is they're amplifying the sound in all of those frequencies. And so it might adjust certain sounds, like the high pitched sound, it boosts the volume up quite a lot. For the mid range, it boosts it a little bit less. And then for the low range, it doesn't really boost it much because I don't really need it. So it's boosting all those different frequencies, kind of like if you were playing around with the knobs on your stereo or your car radio. You've got your treble, your mid, and your bass. And if you're adjusting all those things, you can play with them. And that's kind of the way it works for me wearing hearing aids. But just because I'm turning up the volumes and all those frequencies doesn't mean I can suddenly have clarity for all those sounds. Because it's not, hearing loss is not the same thing as vision, where you can just correct it by adjusting here and there. There's still a loss of clarity that can't be cured. There's no cure to hearing loss.
Gotcha.
Hey, Kurt, I wanted to ask you a follow-up question about ankylosing spondylitis. Are there any other conditions that come along with that or parallel to that?
Yeah, one of the things that I failed to mention earlier is that osteoporosis is another condition that is related to ankylosing spondylitis. And in my case, I have suffered for years with kidney stones. And I have probably, this is no joke, probably had well over 50 since I was in my early 20s. And what we have found is that my condition also has a calcium metabolism issue with my body. So it takes calcium away from my bones and deposits it in the kidneys. And how I first learned I had osteoporosis is I was getting out of my car to pump gas at a convenience store, and I slipped and fell, and my left foot went into the island, the concrete island at the gas pump, and my leg shattered. And broke my tibia and fibula, and had to go to Penn State Hershey Medical Center for trauma surgery and to repair my leg. But after 3 surgeries and aggressive physical therapy, I was able to get back to somewhat normal. But not knowing that ankylosing spondylitis would affect me in that way. So it's a fine line between taking calcium supplements and diet and those kind of things, but they haven't been able to find anything that helps right now. But yeah, ankylosing spondylitis is a lot more complicated of a condition than most people realize, and it also can affect the heart. In terms of the aortic valve, there are many different things that it does, but and they're finding now through research that RA and ankylosing spondylitis kind of go hand in hand. So, I take medication for my hands, and as you well know from a personal experience we had, I was having trouble getting my shirt buttoned, and you helped me button it. So my dexterity is off a little bit, but yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for asking that,
Yeah.
Jeff.
It's interesting. I think a lot of people, when they think about a disability or a different ability, they usually think of it as singular, like this is one issue that a person had. And they often don't realize that a lot of disabilities um, go hand in hand with other issues, other health issues. I mean, even hearing loss, for example, if you have hearing loss, you're more likely to have heart problems, fatigue, depression. For example, they've done studies in people that, especially in older people who have hearing loss and then they don't get treated for it, they don't get hearing aids when they need them. People tend to isolate themselves more because of the hearing impairment, because they feel embarrassed about asking people to repeat themselves or getting frustrated, not being able to understand what people are saying in conversations or group setting. And so that adds a lot of stress, which can lead to fatigue. It can lead to heart problems. People might withdraw from social situations because they get frustrated with it. And so that can lead to depression. And you might not think, oh, hearing loss can cause all those things. And it's not necessarily that it causes those things, but like those things can go hand in hand with it because of the complications that come with it. So there's always things that I think people need to realize that um, no one thing defines a person. And when they have a problem or an issue, a lot of times it's not the only issue that they're dealing with. For example, Kurt, I know you've mentioned this once or twice, but haven't talked about this a lot. You've been also diagnosed with OCD. Can you talk a little bit about like how that diagnosis came about and uh, how that affects you?
Yeah, actually, and we found that it's something that is a genetic thing that runs in our family. But OCD is obsessive compulsive disorder, and it takes many shapes and forms. And in my situation, it happened to be obsessive thoughts. So it wasn't necessarily behavior, but it would be things that I would fixate on. And, it would run through my mind uh, continuously, constantly. And it took some doing between medication and therapy um, to get to a position where I am today. And luckily, I have been able to overcome that. Um, but in a way, it is a benefit to me because I have I tend to pay particular attention to things, and in my mind, I tend to get double check, triple check, quadruple check. Uh, to make sure that things are getting done. But, I drive my wife crazy sometimes because I'll ask her the same question over and over and over. And she'll say, Kurt, you've already asked me that. I told you that yesterday. So I've been blessed that Amy has adapted. And, after 36 years of marriage, she's accustomed to that. But the one thing I was thinking, Jeff, is you and I are cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways. And we're not unlike many of our guests that we've talked to, is that we continue to push forward. And you are one of the busiest guys I know. You have a lot of things that you do despite your disability and the challenges you face. And of all things, you've been a DJ and continue to be a DJ. Not You started out in radio, but you DJ for weddings and do events and that kind of thing. And I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. DJing started out when I was in high school, and the high school I went to in Massachusetts had a little 10-watt radio station. It basically reached as far as the cafeteria. Um, but I very quickly learned the power of like when you hear a song, it can change a person's mood. It can, if you give a shout out to someone, like this goes out to Timmy in the lunchroom. And then they hear it and they get excited and it changes their mood. It improves their day. I really enjoyed that impact that it had on people. So I fell in love with DJing and radio, which kind of go hand in hand. And it was challenging because it meant that I had to listen extra carefully. Um, I had to look up what the lyrics to a song were to make sure I was playing clean song, not inappropriate song. Don't want to get the FCC license taken away. Um, and I also had to learn like how a song starts, how a song ends. If I'm going to talk over the intro of a song, how would I do that, and how long can I talk for? So I start making like little notes to myself, like I can talk for 23 seconds before the voice in the song starts singing the lyrics, because you don't want to talk over the part because people want to sing along to the song. So it was like a lot of extra work that I had to do behind the scenes just to be able to do a basic radio show or to be a DJ. And one thing that is really nice about technology is that it has made it easier. Now with technology, you can see the waveform of an audio file. So like you can see where the drums come in on a song or where the voices come in. You can set cue points in a DJ program. So like if you want to start the song at this part or start the song at that part or end the song at that part, you can do that. As a person who's hard of hearing, I'm constantly looking at people's faces and I'm analyzing the emotions that go through a person's face. If they're happy, if they're sad, because when a person says something, I have to sometimes analyze the tone because I can't hear what they're saying necessarily, or I can't hear the tone in what they're saying, but I can see it on their face if they're happy or sad, angry or anything else. And so with that skill, I can use that for DJing. So like when I'm DJing at an event and I can see a person reacting, like their face lights up when they hear a song that they like. You can also see it very obviously, like when you play a song where everyone knows the dance moves. Like if you play the Macarena, people will get up and start doing the Macarena. So like you can see that impact, even if you were completely deaf, you can see the power of music for a person. And by the way, a person that's completely deaf could still be a DJ. I don't know how much hearing he has, but I know that Nao DeMarco, the America's Next Top Model and Dancing with the Stars contestant, I think, his brother is deaf as well, and he is a DJ. There are other people out there that can do this too. So even a person who's completely deaf, could be a DJ with the technology, but even a person who's completely deaf can enjoy music because they can feel the vibration, they can enjoy the bass line, and a lot of times at shows or concerts or parties with the DJ, you'll see like the lights flash to the beat of the music, so they can enjoy that too. I've done a couple of events for a local deaf club, and it's fun because I get to turn up the bass music and feel the music just the same way they would, and it's a lot of fun. Everyone can enjoy music, regardless of any disabilities or limitations they may have.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we've tried to highlight over and over again, and especially with the guest, is to not focus on what you can't do, but what you can do, and that we all have different abilities, and as we like to call them, superpowers that enable us to do a great deal. And I would just encourage anyone to think that way. That your mindset should be on, hey, I have a lot to offer, and you know that can add a lot of value to friends, family, society, whatever.
Well, Kurt, this has been awesome talking to you. You know, we get to talk to so many awesome people on this podcast, but it's fun to also just to talk to each other and share some of the questions that people have asked us, you know, as we've been doing this podcast. For our listeners out there or our viewers on YouTube, thank you again for joining us. This is Enable, the Disability Podcast. We are at Enable Podcast on social media. Please like, follow, and subscribe.
And please share this podcast with your family and friends so we can share more stories of people with different abilities that bring us all together. Thank you.